Chairman Dodds, Senator Shelby, and members of the committee, I am pleased to present the Federal Reserve's Monetary Policy Report to the Congress. The U.S. economy and financial system have confronted some significant challenges thus far in 2008. The contraction in housing activity that began in 2006 and the associated deterioration in mortgage markets that became evident last year have led to sizable losses at financial institutions and a sharp tightening in overall credit conditions. The effects of the housing contraction and of the financial headwinds on spending and economic activity have been compounded by rapid increases in the prices of energy and other commodities, which have sapped household purchasing power even as they have boosted inflation. Against this backdrop, economic activity has advanced at a sluggish pace during the first half of this year, while inflation has remained elevated. Following a significant reduction in its policy rate over the second half of 2007, the Federal Open Market Committee eased policy considerably further through the spring to counter actual and expected weakness in economic growth and to mitigate downside risk to economic activity. In addition, the Federal Reserve expanded some of the special liquidity programs that were established last year and implemented additional facilities to support the functioning of financial markets and foster financial stability. Although these policy actions have had positive effects, the economy continues to face numerous difficulties, including ongoing strains in financial markets, declining house prices, a softening labor market, and rising prices of oil, food, and some other commodities. Let me now turn to a more detailed discussion of some of these key issues. Developments in financial markets and their implications for the macroeconomic outlook have been a focus of monetary policymakers over the past year. In the second half of 2007, the deteriorating performance of subprime mortgages in the United States triggered turbulence in domestic and international financial markets as investors became markedly less willing to bear credit risks of any type. In the first quarter of 2008, reports of further losses and write-downs at financial institutions intensified investor concerns and resulted in further sharp reductions in market liquidity. By March, many dealers and other institutions, even those that had relied heavily on short-term secured financing, were facing much more stringent borrowing conditions. In mid-March, a major investment bank, the Bear Stearns Companies Incorporated, was pushed to the brink of failure after suddenly losing access to short-term financing markets. The Federal Reserve judged that a disorderly failure of Bear Stearns would pose a serious threat to overall financial stability and would most likely have significant adverse implications for the U.S. economy. In the labor market, private payroll employment has declined this year, falling at an average pace of 94,000 jobs per month through June. Employment in the construction and manufacturing sectors has been particularly hard hit, although employment declines in a number of other sectors are evident as well. The unemployment rate has risen and now stands at 5.5%. In the housing sector, activity continues to weaken. Although sales of existing homes have been about unchanged this year, sales of new homes have continued to fall, and inventories of unsold new homes remain high. In response, home builders continue to scale back the pace of housing starts. Home prices are falling, particularly in regions that experienced the largest price increases earlier this decade. The declines in home prices have contributed to the rising tide of foreclosures. By adding to the stock of vacant homes for sale, these foreclosures have in turn intensified the downward pressure on home prices in some areas. Personal consumption expenditures have advanced at a modest pace so far this year, generally holding up somewhat better than might have been expected given the array of forces weighing on household finances and attitudes. In particular, with the labor market softening and consumer price inflation elevated, real earnings have been stagnant so far this year. Declining values of equities and houses have taken their toll on household balance sheets, credit conditions have tightened, and indicators of consumer sentiment have fallen sharply. In conjunction with the June FOMC meeting, board members and Reserve Bank presidents prepared economic projections covering the years 2008 through 2010. On balance, most FOMC participants expected that, over the remainder of this year, output would expand at a pace appreciably below its trend rate, primarily because of continued weakness in housing markets, elevated energy prices, and tight credit conditions. The issue was that the subprime crisis triggered a much broader retreat from credit and risk-taking, which has affected not just subprime lending, but a wide variety of credit instruments, and that's why it's become a much bigger element in the situation than frankly, that I anticipated at that time. The housing market is still under considerable stress. The construction is still declining. I do believe that we'll start to see stabilization in the construction of homes, new homes, somewhere later this year, beginning of next year. And that will be a benefit because the slowing construction pattern has been subtracting about 1 percentage point from the growth of the GDP going back now for some time. So that will be a benefit. House prices may continue to fall longer than that because of the large inventories of unsold homes that we still face. And I would have to say that there's uncertainty about exactly what the equilibrium level that house prices will reach. And unfortunately, it's that uncertainty, I think, which is generating a lot of the stress and risk aversion we're seeing in financial markets. It's for that reason, the need to find a footing, to find stability in the housing market, that I do think that action by this Congress to support the housing market through strengthening the GSEs and FHA and so on is of vital importance.
Let me talk about the other then major driver of what's happening to our economy, and that's the whole...
I also understand that people are going to make adjustments to meet their own needs. And I suspect you'll see, in the whole, Americans using less gasoline. I bet that's going to happen. And in the meantime, technologies will be coming on the market that will enable them to drive and save money compared to the automobiles they're using before. And as you notice, the automobile industry is beginning to adjust here at home as consumer demand changes. And the great thing about our system, it is the consumer that drives our system. It's the individual American and their collection that end up driving the economy. Yeah, I am.
Could I follow up on a couple of points, please?
Okay.
You never mention oil